Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa inspired a generation of bombastic British rock drummers to swagger into the spotlight.
Now, go, man. Here we go.
Drums keep pounding a rhythm to the brain.
But in America, they also paved the way for a more unassuming kind of player. Drummers who shunned the limelight, but whose work would still become hugely influential.
I love the colorful push.
See, I'm not quite 100 years old yet.
You may not recognize this guy.
Dean Martin used to say, "Don't just help me stand there."
But you definitely know his music.
Been a while.
He's had so many hit records, it's almost impossible to keep track.
Are we running?
I'm picking up good vibration.
First of all, the Beach Boys. I did all the Beach Boys records, every one of them. All the Fifth Dimension, the Mamas and the Papas. I did every record with the Mamas and the Papas. Frank Sinatra, Nancy Sinatra, God bless her. Little Frankie Sinatra, God bless him, he just died. Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., all the Rat Pack I did. Gary Lewis, Jerry Lewis, who just died. And then I started working real rock and roll with Tommy Sands. And all of a sudden, boom, I'm now with Elvis.
I'm picking up good vibration.
John Denver. I spent almost 11 years with John Denver.
I'm picking up good vibration.
Simon and Garfunkel. We had 4, 5, 6 records in a row. It's major hits. Bridge Over Troubled Water, Mrs. Robinson. I had 6 years in a row where I had Record of the Year, but I was also on 4 or 5 of the nominees, so I couldn't miss. We started with Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, A Taste of Honey, and I've always called it A Taste of Money for Herb. Frank Sinatra, Strangers in the Night, Fifth Dimension, Up, Up, and Away, Aquarius, Let the Sunshine In, Richard Harris, MacArthur Park. God, there's almost 6,000 songs. It's almost impossible.
Hal Blaine is probably the most recorded drummer in music history, influencing a whole generation of drummers without them even knowing him.
The musicians weren't credited. So kind of unbeknownst to me, I was very influenced by Hal because of hearing all those great Phil Spector recordings, or also the Beach Boys stuff, or the Monkees, for instance. His style really was about playing for the song. Although he had the technical expertise to take it further, he didn't choose to do so. He played for the song.
Going through all of the records that Hal Blaine played on is like going through a history of American popular music. His track record is absolutely incredible, and you can't really go through a day on FM radio without hearing something that Hal played on.
Be My Baby, as I recall, it was written this way. Be my baby. Being the faker that I am, it's very possible that I started it with and dropped the stick or something, and instead of stopping the tape, I just continued. So it started this way.
You know, a lot of people don't think of drummers playing riffs, they think of drummers just keeping a beat. But Hal created a trademark sound. You know, the intro to Be My Baby. The musicianship that went into those records, it wasn't just keeping a beat, it was like, you know, orchestrated. You know, it was part of the song.
Hal Blaine was in the right place at the right time to become the most in-demand session player in America. But his success was based not just on luck, but on a shrewd understanding of the business of music.
I went to the Roy Knapp School of Percussion in Chicago. I was going to school from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, but then I was working in strip clubs from 8 at night to 4 in the morning. So I was getting all this practice, sight reading, And that's where I learned that I was an accompanist, and that's what I loved doing. When the so-called rock and roll started, I mean, I just came off the Count Basie band, so I was really a jazzer and a swinger, like most of the guys in Hollywood. But these guys, they refused to play this filthy rock and what is this rock and roll garbage? It's not going to be around very long. Well, it's going on 60 years now.
Everyone took from Hal. Between he and, of course, Mr. Earl Palmer, they played on most of the hit records that come out of Southern California in the 60s.
Perhaps Hal's biggest contribution to the art of drumming was to preach the mantra of playing to the song.
I worked as an actor for a while, like a lot of guys have to do when they first go to Hollywood. But when I worked with all these great actors, they would start saying, what is my motivation? What is the scene about? Well, I realized that there was no difference. I didn't have a script, so I wanted to hear a song. When I heard the words to the song, that was my motivation. The song told me what to play.
Hal Blaine was the first of a new kind of drummer. Smart and sensitive session musicians, happy to put their artistic talents to the service of the songwriters who employed them.
Well, Hal, I mean, you could do a whole show on Hal. I love him to bits. I would sneak around the studios when I was starting to do session work in LA, and if one of his drum kits were in the hallway, I would just go up and I'd go, oh, God, these are Hal's drums. My big break came meeting a man named Peter Asher. Peter came to see me and hired me to play on James Taylor's Sweet Baby James album. And I found myself in Peter Asher's living room, kind of next to a grand piano that Carole King was playing, and James Taylor sitting in front of me on a chair playing acoustic guitar.
Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you.
That whole rehearsal, I played with brushes, because if I played with sticks, I'd be louder than anything in the room. And when we got into the studio, I said, so should I try sticks? And he goes, no, let's try it with the brushes, the way you rehearsed it.
I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find.
I've had the opportunity to play with lots of singer-songwriters.
But I always thought that I'd see.
I realized early on that the most important thing to me was to listen.
Won't you look down upon me, Jesus?
From a drummer's point of view, if you think about what you can do to enhance it, as opposed to think about, oh, I can play this new beat that I just taught myself in this song. It's an opportunity for me to show that off. I don't know if people think that way. I never did.
I won't make it any.
I prefer to err on the side of economy.
Oh, I've seen fire and I've seen rain.
I would focus on making sure that I knew what the lyrics were portraying and what parts really need emotion.
I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend.
On that particular song, and it's a series of bars that's all suspended. It's just going dun, 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 dun. I chose to play those fills over the bar lines. Ba-dum, dum, ba-dum, ba-da-da-da, da-da-da. Made them seem more like a melody because they were tonal. Picking little melodic pieces to play rhythmically.
The sensitivity and musicality of drumming is often overlooked, especially when drummers are playing loud and hard. But just because the drumming is dark and heavy, it doesn't mean it's not musical.
There's a place inside. It's like really primal, and it's where all my emotions are. At the end of the night, if we were playing a live gig, if my emotions weren't all put out on the drum kit or out into the audience, then it was a bad night. Everything that I am is going into whatever I'm performing, particularly if it's dark, which a lot about the music that I've played with has been very dark, and it naturally calls for aggression. And I love being aggressive. All my instincts, everything about me has to play the whole thing out. I'm not just sitting in the band. When we would go up tempo, we all locked into the same place. It's no good, everybody being on a different page. And so when we locked it in tight, and that's when we would go out as loud as we could possibly be. And the aggression came out. Those are very aggressive musical statements. I love what we did with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. It's a great example, I think, of just locking in this very, very loud, raucous sound, and everybody's in the same place. We're all doing the same thing. And we go in there and it's just like...
I was just stoned out of my mind. I ditched high school and I ended up, at my friend's house, and, he goes, "Oh, check out this band." And he played Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. And I'll never forget his mom banging on the door, telling him to turn that shit off because it's satanic, it's evil, and he didn't care, and he just cranked it up. And I'll never forget how dark and eerie and monstrous it was.
Black Sabbath's unique brand of heavy rock still is, gloriously dangerous and compelling. This was music pushed to its darkest, most aggressive limits. For its thrill-seeking disciples, just one ingredient was missing: speed.
When I'm playing, it's euphoric. It's exciting. It's aggressive. It makes me feel really good inside, in my soul. There's like a level of consciousness that I can't describe, and I feel it. It's almost trance-like. As a kid, I remember whenever I would hear a song on the radio that had a certain drive, a certain push, I would always want to buy that 45. For example, I'll never forget a Zeppelin song I heard on the radio called the Wonton Song, and I thought that was unusually heavy. Kind of menacing, like a giant monster just coming at you. When you're between the ages of 13 and 16, 17, there's a lot of adrenaline. There's this fire that you have when you're that age. And I discovered at that time punk music. I felt very much connected with punk because of its speed and its aggression. I noticed that a lot of punks were wearing Motorhead shirts. I bought No Sleep to Hammersmith, a couple songs on there, like Overkill, I think Ace of Spades. It's like, wow, okay, this is where I'm going.
If you like to gamble, I'll tell you how you land. You win some, lose some, and do it.
Before the whole punk influence, I was listening to heavy metal, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, which was, I think, a step in the right direction from what I was already listening to, which was Sabbath, Zeppelin, Deep Purple. Like, for example, like a drum beat like a Judas Priest, Rapid Fire had a beat. So what I did is, instead of giving it a 4/4 vibe, I'd give it, more of the snare would be on the 1 rather than the kick drum. And then I would speed it up. So that rhythm would then turn into... And then add the famous punk beats of that time. And then that's where you get this mix, where you're... When you put that through a PA, and you have the right engineer, your clothes are vibrating, and you feel it inside, in your gut, in your heart, in your chest. That takes it to another level. Some people never heard anything like that before.
Even though I had an all-encompassing musical ear, I listened to everything growing up. Metal, aggressive metal, then thrash metal. That's just my passion. When I joined Dark Angel, I was just like, Jim Durkin, main songwriter. I was like, let's just play the heaviest shit we can. He's like, yes, that's what I'm into. Bands like Metallica, Slayer, Anvil. I was also a gargantuan Raven fan. It's just the most exciting drumming.
What is this that stands before me?
When Tony would play something extremely loud, my natural place to go would be to try to make my drums as loud as possible. So I had to learn how to use cymbals, because you can only hit a bass drum once and you can only hit a snare drum. So a lot of the work that I did, I went to floor toms and a concert tom, and I worked with cymbals and concert toms because he has more power.
Find out.
You can also sustain on floor toms, the underneath of the bottom end. You can sustain it like that. So I learned to do these gargantuan kind of like...
Bill Ward from Black Sabbath. Arguably the heaviest band ever. Like John, John, Don, Don. And Tony's the dark master of the riff. But I see bands cover Black Sabbath and they want to bash the shit out of it and play really like... And Bill Ward was like a jazz drummer, playing in the heaviest band ever, but he swung and...
Satan sitting there, he's smiling.
I was actually playing on the crash cymbal. I was actually playing in jazz time. It was a that's a direct descendant from but it's slowed way down, so you go
And that's sustaining because the cymbal will crash on. But with cymbals, you can play nice and kind of quiet and playing an accompaniment. So it's just there and holding the track. But eventually what I'd like to do is add more and more and more power to the cymbal till in the end, my cymbals were absolutely just blaring. And I love the extreme of cymbals that are just out of control.
Earliest, I guess, double bass influence would be Cozy Powell from the Rainbow era. Songs like Kill the King, A Light in the Black, songs like that that had the double bass just chugging, and that was speed metal for its time. That was super fast to my 11-year-old ears or whatever. You know, I was like, wow, so cool, so fast. Which would lead me to bands like Anvil with Rob Reiner on drums. He was a serious double basser back then, and it always felt like all the song was just about to fall apart because he was playing so frenetically. It was super fast. I was also a gargantuan Raven fan. Raven were the template for thrash, the progenitors of speed metal sort of thing. Their drummer at the time, Rob Wacko Hunter, he was doing all this crazy double bass stuff. It just sounded so cool. I always loved all the fast stuff.
No other instrument requires the use of all four limbs in the same way as the drums. Being a drummer is physically and mentally demanding, especially for styles of music that use two bass drums. The relentless rapid fire of multiple bass drums is a hallmark of extreme metal. But the pioneer of the double bass was no long-haired speed freak. The metal guys owe an unlikely debt to a debonair virtuoso from the bygone age of big band jazz.
The inventor of the double bass drum is Louis Bellson. He recorded a tune with Duke Ellington called Skin Deep that had a great feature for the double bass drum. And then after that, all of Duke Ellington's drummers were required to play double bass because it looked so good on stage. Whether or not they actually played it, but Louis actually played it.
Louis Bellson, Ed Shaughnessy, all those guys played double bass. I think metal drummers, rock drummers, we feel the same thing those jazz drummers played at that time. That same passion, that same energy, and just pure enjoyment.
Every drummer that played with Duke played two bass drums. To a gig in London with the Duke Ellington band with Sam Woodyard, and some of the things Sam played were so cool with the two bass drums, you know. Oh yeah, one particular fill-in was tom 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 bass drum, bugger boom boom. Really cool sound, and that's what sold me on getting two bass drums. It was just that one fill-in.
Sort of like if you're using two bass drums, if you play a time with one, you can fill in with the other one, and it makes a pattern, the two of them together. So you're keeping time here, right?
Double bass slowly made its influence into rock and roll. Ginger Baker was the main instigator. And then the next person that really made double bass popular was Billy Cobham.
Billy Cobham, he was a huge influence because he had a marching background, he had real control. It's the first time I really heard somebody play super precise double stroke rolls and flams worked onto the drum set, not just on marching drums. His huge drum set, you know, very powerful double bass drums in a jazz fusion context, unheard of. It was very, very exciting to listen to.
That caused a sensation because he was such a virtuoso in the way he used them, and his overall approach to the drums became influential to both jazz drummers and rock drummers. And that's when you see people like Terry Bozzio playing double bass and Alex Van Halen playing double bass and me playing double bass, and it went from there.
Having double bass drums allows drummers to play patterns originally designed for the hands with the feet. And that's with 2 pedals. But why stop there?
Well, on this kit at the moment I have 6 pedals, and I take inspiration from how we play the drums with the hands and do the same thing with the feet. We play multiple instruments with our hands. So I do the same thing with my feet. I play a double pedal on my bass drum, so I have the possibility to play the largest drum on the drum set with both my feet. So I have a bass drum pedal here, one with my left foot as well. Then I have a hi-hat stand to my right, which is very unconventional. Most drummers have only one hi-hat stand on their left. I have one on my left and on my right. It sounds like this. Then I have another hi-hat stand to my left here. Traditional hi-hat. Then I use a pedal on an instrument called a crasher that allows me to play metallic sounds and substitute for hand patterns with my foot. And then I have another pedal down here that's just a tiny little snare drum. And that allows me to play traditional backbeats with my foot, which frees up my hand to do something else on top of that. So I have snare drum, crasher, hi-hat, bass drum, and hi-hat. And I can play multiple sounds by bridging pedals. So sometimes I don't just play the bass drum by itself like this, but I bridge and step on 2 pedals like so. And I get 2 sounds at the same time. And I can do the same thing with this one. If you look at drum set playing traditionally, we play a pattern that consists of certain stickings, just alternating hands or combinations of singles and doubles and triple strokes. And we orchestrate those patterns on the drums, like. But you can take a pattern like this, you know, and put a backbeat on it. And then do the same thing with the feet. That'll free my hands up completely to do something else. So I can take a paradiddle pattern like that and play like. And there's a lot of that stuff in my own music. For example, with Stork, there are songs that we do that have very complex, syncopated 30-second note bass drum patterns in different time signatures than the hand patterns, but there's still a backbeat in the music. So as an example, you know, the feel would be, underneath that, I would be doing something like that with my feet. 1, 2, 3.
Of course, there is another way to create complex drum patterns, and that's to get yourself one of these bad boys.
There's bass drum there, snare drum there, tom-toms there, and these are the cymbals.
Amazing.
I don't know no heroes.
So there's that thing, you know, you see it all the time. Drum machines have replaced drummers, and this is it. Technology have taken over, and they're going to press play, and you're not going to see a drummer on stage. It's nonsense, really, you know. Drumming's just evolving. One of my favourite artists, Ronnie Size, and somebody I played with in more recent times, late 90s, 2000, Congo Natty or Rebel MC back in the day as he was known. Those guys would compose music in their studios, and it wouldn't always necessarily be a drummer composing, so they have a keyboard and they do the old school way of programming drums. And then the drummer would have to bring that to life on the gig. So how do you replicate something that a non-drummer has done that has no kind of phrasing or really, like, it's not how a drummer would think?
In my head, when I was writing this part, I was thinking of the music I used to listen to when I was like 12, 13, and I was really into early 90s jungle. Kind of like drum and bass, but like a bit raw. That's my go-to source of rhythm, just naturally, just from my early days creeping into clubs at the age of 15.
If you don't love me, you don't love anybody. If you don't love me.
Just having that sort of rhythm put into your soul and your system, like over and over and over again. A lot of the tracks I used to listen to would have a breakbeat on the kick and snare, but then they would have this like cymbal that would be kind of in the background, but like just really, really relentlessly kind of noisy. The guitarist in Savage's, Gemma, came up with the guitar riff for the answer, and she loves things in threes, so it was kind of became this tripletty pattern. Basically, I'm replicating my own version in my head of what I'm hearing from a sampler, from a track that I loved 20 years ago.
From rudimental snare patterns to breathtaking displays of physical dexterity, from catchy pop hooks to vivid symphonic soundscapes, the story of drumming is varied and diverse. But we're all simply in the business of making music, and that's the key to the art of drumming.
If you held a gun to my head and asked me who's your favorite drummer of all time,
So here are 20 of the drummers that they picked out.
Sound of the funky drummer. You
my friend Clyde. He was the originator of it.
Come on, Tim!
I'm just a timekeeper. I basically always thought drums were to keep time. It's fun and for groove. I've never done a solo in my life. I don't think I never tried. I have this mental block about playing 4-bar drum solo because it doesn't sound right to me for a drummer to do solos and stuff. I just like playing time. So that's my life story.
At that time, Jeff Porcaro was just blazing in the studio. He would do the most amazing stuff and make it sound effortless. And he was the king of just this beautiful ghost notes on the snare drum, which only Jeff could do at that time.
Yeah, but it did feel like it was a bit of a boys' thing to play the drum kit.
It's true. The world of rock and roll drums is dominated by men, but things are changing. There are some incredible and inspiring female drummers out there already. Just like me, our next drummer is a South London boy. We went to the same school, in fact. He is one of rock's true living legends, so please be upstanding for Lewisham's finest, Mr. Ginger Baker.
I want you to take me where I belong.
So who is Earl Palmer and why is he so important in the evolution of drumming and what we do when we get behind that instrument over there? Earl Palmer was born in New Orleans in the 1920s, and he really was a pioneer.
From Bill Bruford to Terry Bozzio, Carl Palmer to Phil Collins, progressive rock has produced a long list of virtuoso players. Inspiring legions of devoted fans, these guys have pushed the boundaries of what's possible both technically and musically on the drum kit, none more so than our next drummer.
When I was growing up, my whole style of music was the heaviest stuff you could find. Stuff like Ted Nugent and Aerosmith and Black Sabbath and Queen and Angel and Thin Lizzy. And then I discovered Rush.
When I discovered Rush, I think it was at a time when I just really wanted to learn more, and I became obsessed. Neil Peart probably had the biggest impact on my drumming of anybody.
I was so into air drumming. Like I said, I played air drums for 4 years before I ever got my first kit, and I got really, really good at it. I'll take a Pepsi challenge with anybody on the air drums. There was stuff like Yes, Bill Bruford, which a lot of his stuff was just a little bit out of my reach. But Neil Peart, I just got right off the bat.
One of the first things that struck me about Neil was the drum kit. While all my other friends were looking at Playboy centerfolds, I was looking through Modern Drummer and looking at all the drum kits and the ads. And those mid-70s, early 80s Rush albums, I lived, breathed, ate, and shat those albums. I knew every nuance of those drum parts inside and out. Those became like the ultimate challenges for me as a teenage drummer. For me, Neil was the epitome of the progressive rock drummer.
Next, we step back in time to the golden age of big band jazz.
He recorded a tune with Duke Ellington called Skin Deep that had a great feature for the double bass drum. And then after that, all of Duke Ellington's drummers were required to play double bass because it looked so good on stage, whether or not they actually played it. But Louis actually played it.
ladies and gentlemen, we have three fine young men from Seattle. Here they are, Nirvana.
But there are a few drummers outside of the world of rock and roll whose influence is so great we simply couldn't leave them out.